Hey, it's Yesenia from Novels and Nectar. If you're new here, welcome. This is a cozy bookish corner where we talk through romance, romantasy, and whatever else I'm reading, so you can decide if a book belongs on your TBR or if you just need a quick reminder of what happened before you dive into the next installment. In each episode, I'll share a quick review, then a spoiler-heavy summary for those of you who've already read the book and just want a refresher. I will always keep the review lighter on spoilers, and I will give you a very clear warning before we move into the summary. All right, now let's get into today's book.
Hey, welcome back in. How are you? So today we're talking about The Wolf King, and I actually really enjoyed this one. Think shifter romance, there is a love triangle, and just ACOTAR meets Outlander. That's as clearly as I can put it. So this is a story that is told in first-person point of view from our main female character. It is a romantasy. And when it comes to spice level, I give this about a 2.5, maybe a 3, but more so 2.5 out of 5. Some content warnings to kind of watch out for include some graphic violence, captivity, sexual threat, and some depictions of abuse. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into the review. Long live the king. I actually really enjoyed this one. I kept hearing about book 2 being way better than book 1, and that alone had me waiting until the trilogy was getting closer to be done. Mainly because I'm not really ready to sign up for more years of emotional suffering and waiting, as we have with many of our other favorite books. But once I saw that this is coming later this year, I was like, okay, a couple of months of waiting, I can do that. Let's go. So now, having finished book 1, I am so glad that I did not rush into it, because this book is giving, as I said, major early ACOTAR energy with hints of what I think might be peeking into ACOMAF territory. I cannot wait for book 2, because if that really is the case, I am so here for it. So the story revolves around a princess named Aurora, and so she hasn't really been treated very well. She's more of a political chess piece, and she's always just been used for her beauty and not really seen as a person. And so she doesn't really have a say in anything, including who she marries. And the story ends up opening up with her already engaged to this terrible man who is also using her for his own gain. And on the eve of their wedding, she ends up surprising herself and everyone around her by doing something that she never thought she would do. She ends up stepping in to protect a young wolf during an underground wolf fight. And so this ends up becoming the first domino to drop in a change of things that end up changing her entire fate. By doing this, she ends up catching the attention of an alpha wolf, Callum. And he's also imprisoned here, but he sees her for what she truly is. He sees a prisoner in her own circumstance, and so he decides to help her. In the night, when he's looking to escape, he ends up finding her and giving her the option to come with him. And ultimately, she ends up accepting this. As they begin to know each other, they find that their ideas of who they thought they were are very, very different from reality. And their connection begins to build really slowly and sweetly. This is because, more so, Aurora is this sheltered, princess. She's inexperienced. Meanwhile, the wolves, on the other hand, are very open and wild. And so watching Aurora navigate the world definitely felt really juicy at times, but also you really appreciate how tender and careful Callum is with her, because he really is drawn to her, but he also does not want to scare her off. The werewolf element also really worked for me. The intensity, the possessiveness, and the primal instincts. Yes. And yes, the biting. I am always here for a little bit of biting. So about halfway through the book, we end up meeting a new character named Blake. And when he comes in, I was like, oh. Let me paint you a picture of what crossed my mind here. So Callum is blonde, green-eyed, with shoulder-length hair and giving off tons of Tamlin energy. Meanwhile, we have Blake, who is like this tall, dark, like broody. He's always in black, and he calls Aurora darling. So he gives bad guy vibes, of course, but also we see that maybe there's something like deeper hidden, like a deeper hidden suffering. And I totally got Rhysand doppelganger here. So throughout the entire story, Aurora feels like Blake is working against her. Yet sometimes, whenever she really needs protecting, he ends up showing up for her, and she doesn't really understand why. And we don't really know much about him or his past, other than we know that he's plotting towards something bigger that we don't really know. We're unsure, really, I guess, of like what his true motives are. Overall, like, just to premise all this, I'm not really a love triangle person, but the tension with these three in this book really does work. By the end of book one, it feels like we know where Aurora's heart is going to go, but we're starting to get hints of what might be hidden beneath what we think we know. And so the setup for book two is already starting to take shape. So many feelings. So I did do this one on both the Kindle and the audio, and the Scottish accent for the main male character was phenomenal. It is a duet narration, so Callum has his own male narrator, and the female narrator ends up like handling everyone else, which I thought was nice. But one piece I would give feedback on with the audio is that I really wish that Blake had been given maybe the male narrator too, and like he would have changed it up into different voices, because I felt like that would have just like leveled it up more. Nonetheless, though, I cannot complain. I absolutely recommend this book. So mainly just easy read, but also the nostalgia that it brought me back to the ACOTAR series, which I think, as many of you know, or maybe not know, is what really started my romantasy journey. So yeah, I am super excited for you guys to jump into this as well. Secretly rooting for Blake. Cough, cough. Okay, so once again, spoiler warning, we're jumping into the full detailed summary. So if you haven't read this book and you don't want any spoilers, please go ahead and stop here. Okay, so the story opens with Princess Aurora sitting beside her father and her betrothed, Lord Sebastian. They're watching captive werewolves forced to fight each other to the death. It is brutal and barbaric, and Aurora is expected to just sit there and smile. She has spent her entire life being treated like a political chess piece, passed between alliances, valued only for what she can offer her father. This marriage to Sebastian is just the latest in the arrangements made to do something politically with her without her input. That ends up changing the night of the fight. When a powerful alpha named Callum is about to fight a terrified teenage wolf named Ryan, Aurora stands and stops it. She asks for the boy as a wedding gift. Sebastian, her betrothed, ends up agreeing, but makes sure to remind her the type of man that she's going to be marrying. That night, against every rule of the castle, she ends up sneaking down to the kennels with stolen medical supplies to try and tend to Ryan's wounds herself. Callum is also in the cell beside him, and the two end up talking through the bars. She learns that he is already planning his escape, and although she knows that this might be useful information, she does not end up reporting him. The next morning, the wolves attack the castle. In the chaos, Callum finds Aurora and carries her through the fighting. Near the western gate, he stops and gives her a choice, something that no one has ever really done for her. She can either go back to Sebastian, or she can escape with him. He tells her that he needs her as leverage to retrieve something that Sebastian has stolen from his people, but he promises to protect her and set her free once he has it. And so, Aurora takes his hand. They ride out of the castle together and cross the border wall into the Northlands, a vast and wild land that is nothing like the Southlands that she grew up in. They travel for days, initially with a group, but eventually just the two of them. Somewhere along the way, she starts to see him differently. He is not what she expected. He tends to her, teases her, and tells her the legend behind what his people are searching for, a sacred relic called the Heart of the Moon. It is said to give wolves the power to shift at will, not just under the full moon. His people believe that Sebastian has it, and getting it back is everything to them. When they finally arrive at Castle Mata Ali, the Wolf King stronghold, Callum introduces Aurora under a false name called Rory in order to protect her identity. The true Wolf King, James, is away, leaving a cruel and aggressive wolf named Robert in charge. When they arrive, the atmosphere is hostile from the moment that they walk in. Then we meet a dark-haired alpha male named Blake. He speaks of the Southlanders' accent and quietly convinces Robert to let Callum keep his pet, Aurora. Callum and Aurora both realize immediately that Blake knows exactly who she is, and neither of them can figure out what he plans to do with that information. In a private meeting, Blake meets with both of them and agrees to keep her secret. Later, Callum pulls Aurora aside and explains what it means to be a human woman in wolf territory without any protection. The castle is full of wolves who answer to no one but their alpha, and with King James away, the hierarchy is unstable. He asks her to wear a collar around her neck, marking her as his under wolf law. In the wolf world, the collar means that no other wolf can touch her without answering to him directly. Aurora refuses at first, finding the whole thing barbaric and demeaning. She is not property. But after a few tense days of watching the hostility grow around her and of feeling the ice follow her through every corridor, she finally sacrifices her feelings and decides to put the collar on in order to keep her safe. This in turn does allow her more freedom to move around the castle. Not long after, Callum's missing party ends up returning. Ryan is with them, gravely wounded by a wolfbane-laced weapon, a poison that stops wolves' healing entirely. Blake, who we learn is also the castle's healer, is the only one in the Northlands who knows the antidote. He saves Ryan's life, and while he works, he also asks Aurora to assist him. She proves far more capable than anyone expected, even to herself. Before they leave the infirmary, Blake finds a note in Ryan's pocket addressed to Aurora. It is from Sebastian, who knows exactly where she is. Over the following days, something quietly begins to shift between Aurora and Callum. He is careful with her, in a way that no one has ever been. He gives her space, shares things about himself, and never once makes her feel like a prisoner, even though technically that is what she is. She starts to let her guard down, and the more time they spend together, the harder it becomes for either of them to pretend that what is growing between them is nothing deeper. As the full moon approaches, the energy inside the castle begins to shift. Wolf instincts begin to run high, and Callum grows distant. Aurora cannot understand why. Later, Fiona, one of Callum's closest friends, explains that he is actively suppressing his wolf nature around Aurora to keep himself in check. He does not want to lose control around her, and he is finding it harder and harder the closer the full moon gets. On the night of the full moon, Aurora is told to stay in her room. But of course, she does not listen. She hears a human scream from somewhere inside the castle and follows it to a dark chamber where she finds Blake half-dressed, drenched in sweat and clearly in agony, fighting the shift within him, trying not to turn. After seeing her, he ends up shifting into a wolf form and tells her to run. She runs for her life. He begins chasing her through the castle and out in the dark forest, herding her through the trees until she is cornered against the river where she has nowhere left to go. He pins her to the ground, licks her face, and bares his teeth. Just as she braces herself for the end, a massive tawny wolf crashes into the clearing. Callum. He and Blake begin to fight, and Blake eventually retreats into the trees with Aurora's cloak in his mouth. The next morning, Callum explains what actually happened. Blake was protecting her the whole time. He chased her into a secluded spot to get his scent on her, keeping the other hunting wolves away from her in the process. The piece of cloak that he took was a decoy to lead the pack in the wrong direction. He did not have to do that, or any of it, and neither of them can quite figure out why he did it. Back at the castle, things between Aurora and Callum continue to build. One evening, the tension between them reaches a breaking point. But Callum pulls back before it goes any further, telling her that she cannot truly choose him while she is still his prisoner. The next morning, he is gone before she wakes, riding out without saying goodbye, in order to go find King James. And in his absence, things begin to unravel. Isla, a wolf who has made no secret of her feelings for Callum, ends up stealing Aurora's collar while she sleeps. And without it, she is completely unprotected, and it does not take long for the wolves around her to notice. Magnus, a dangerous wolf that she met earlier, corners her in the corridor almost immediately with his goons. Just as she thinks she has no way out of what is clearly a threatening situation, a hand appears from behind her and places a black silk collar around her neck. Magnus and his friends take one look at it, apologize, and scatter without another word. Aurora turns to find Blake standing behind her. She is now wearing his collar. She does not like it, but realizes that he has provided her safety, and so she keeps it on while Callum is gone. When Callum finally returns, he is in bad shape, shot with a silver bullet laced with wolfsbane that is actively working through his system and preventing him from healing. But before anyone can tend to the wound, he notices Blake's collar around Aurora's neck and is angered by it. In the middle of an argument with Aurora as to why she is wearing it, he collapses. Aurora runs for Blake, who has to taunt Callum with his threats about Aurora, saying exactly what he plans to do with her, until the rage forces Callum's wolf to rise up and fight the poison from the inside out, ultimately saving Callum's life. Not long after, once he is healed and the collar situation has been explained, Callum and Aurora finally begin to open up to each other fully. But just when things start to feel like they're starting to settle, King James returns. He calls a feast that night, welcoming Aurora, and she does not know what to make of it. During the feast, Blake finds a moment to pull Aurora aside while dancing and tells her quietly that she is in danger and that everything unfolding around her is part of a larger game. He does not explain any further. Later that night, Callum shakes her awake, telling her that the feast was a distraction and that James has already sent word to Sebastian that she is here. He plans to trade Aurora for the Heart of the Moon regardless of what Callum wants, and he can no longer protect her here. They choose to run. On their way, they run into Blake, who tries to stop them, but ultimately lets them go. They ride out through the night and continue on for a couple of days along a hidden route to stay ahead of James's wolves. For the first time since all of this began, they have real alone time together, away from the castle, away from everyone. They make camp beside a lock and talk openly and honestly for the first time about who they actually are beneath their circumstances. Aurora tells Callum that no one has ever tried to know her before. That night, they become fully intimate with each other, her finally giving herself to her desires, and for a brief moment, everything feels free and uncomplicated. It does not last. The next morning, James's men find them, and Blake appears in the chaos and captures Aurora, pressing something over her mouth before she can fight back. She loses consciousness. She wakes in a dungeon. James comes to her with an ultimatum. She can marry him, become his queen, and face Sebastian from a position of power, or she can be handed back to Sebastian, which would almost certainly mean her death. Aurora refuses him. James hits her across the face, and she refuses him again. He throws her back into the cell to reconsider. Blake visits her in the dungeon and tries to convince her to accept James's offer, telling her it is the only way that she can survive this, but she still refuses. So James moves forward with the trade anyway, dressing her and bringing her out to meet Sebastian's army. But on the ride there, Aurora makes one last attempt to change the outcome. She proposes a deal to James directly. Let her go in with Sebastian, give her a weapon, and she will kill him herself. James pauses. He tells her he is doing this for his brother's sake, not for hers, but he ultimately ends up agreeing. He slips a knife into her hand and tells her quietly that if she gets the chance, she should take it. His men will attack anyway. The exchange takes place in a valley with Sebastian's army on one side and James's wolves on the other. In return for Aurora, James receives the Heart of the Moon, a glowing white rock that pulses with ancient power from the moment it changes hands. Then something happens that should not have been possible. The moonlight floods the valley, and the wolves begin to shift, even though it is not a full moon. And as we remember, wolves can only shift under a full moon without the relic. So this is the first time that anyone has seen its power in action, and it works exactly as the legend promised. Shocked by what is unfolding, Sebastian throws Aurora into a carriage and they flee. Inside the carriage, Sebastian confirms what Aurora has begun to fear. Her mother did not die of illness. Her father had her poisoned. She pretends to submit, gets close enough, and ends up slitting his throat. She climbs out of the wreckage only to find James in wolf form stalking toward her. He attacks her before she can say a word, biting her deeply at the waist. Callum crashes into him and fights him back. Blake ends up arriving in wolf form as well, and takes James by the throat, giving them the chance to get away. Callum carries Aurora from the battlefield as she fades in and out of consciousness. Blake catches up and confirms what he has suspected all along. Aurora is a half-wolf, just like Blake, and James's bite will either kill her or activate a dormant wolf gene that she has been carrying her whole life without her knowing it. Blake says that he knows of a ritual that may save her, one that requires him to share his own life force with her. He presses his forehead to hers and begins to chant. As Aurora pulls his essence into herself, she experiences flashes of his memories. Shackles, blood, pain, darkness, a ruined church with a beast locked in a crypt below. She wakes in Blake's castle, alive. The wound is healed, but something remains from the ritual. Something unexpected. A permanent psychic bond between her and Blake. She is horrified. This bond means that whatever one of them feels, or if ever one of them suffers, the other will feel it too. Callum goes for Blake the moment he understands what has happened, but Aurora cries out in pain the instant that he makes contact. The bond is already at play. He cannot lay a hand on Blake without the pain transferring directly to Aurora. This then complicates things even further, because if James ever captures Blake and tortures him, Aurora will feel it too. With that reality sitting heavy in the room, Blake offers to help Callum rally the outlying clans to challenge James for the throne. In order to protect Aurora, Callum has no real choice but to agree. Later that night, when Aurora wakes to find Blake bringing her tea for the pain that they are both feeling through the bond, she begins to piece everything together. Blake engineered all of it from the very beginning. He maneuvered Callum into a position to become the Wolf King, knowing that once Callum held the throne, Blake can challenge him for it, and because of the bond, Callum cannot challenge him to the death without also killing Aurora. He would have no choice but to forfeit, and Blake would get to walk away as king without ever having had to fight fairly. Feeling angered and betrayed, she confronts him, and he does not deny a single word. He raises his glass and smiles at her. Long live the king.
All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you want to dive deeper into the books I talk about here, you can head over to my blog at novelsandnectar.com with a K, where I share spicy chapter lists, similar book recommendations, song pairings, and discussion questions if you want to keep the conversation going. If you are part of a book club and want ready-to-use questions and guides all in one place, you can also join the Nectar Nook, my membership where I put everything together for you in one cute, cozy space. And if you want to keep up with new episodes and new reads, be sure to hit the subscribe button and join my newsletter so you never miss a bookish update. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you in the next one.